Katelyn and welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be a bit of a reading recap of everything that I read during the summer season, plus my fall TBR. If you couldn't tell by my last video where I was preparing for the fall season, I am very excited for autumn to finally be here. And I think that my fall TBR is very well curated with books that will definitely put me in the spirit of fall, if you will. So I am going to go ahead and get started with my summer reading recap so we can quickly get to my fall reads. The first book that I read this summer was Scythe and Sparrow by Brynne Weaver, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. This was the third and final book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. I really liked the main female character in this book because she was very chaotic and fun, and the last couple of books, the main female characters have been like fun, but they've been more straightforward and straight to the point. But this female main character was just very chaotic in a very fun way. One thing that I really like about this series and that I like to see in other books as well is when we get to revisit certain scenes from other people's perspectives or see how a scene actually ends. And that happened quite a lot in this book, and I really liked that. I was honestly a little devastated to actually finish this book because I really liked this series and I would love to get more content from these characters if we could. Next up, we have The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. And I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I will admit I'm the kind of person that if I have given a lot of books on Goodreads 5 stars in a row, I feel like I have to find a book that's bad to kind of balance it out, to make it look like I'm not just giving everything I read 5 stars. So I felt a little, not guilty, but weird giving this book 5 stars, but I mean, it's a really good book and I really enjoyed it. So I had to stay true to myself. I totally didn't see the plot twist coming, which this author, McManus, is very good at. I just love her books. They are so good. I'm honestly really hoping that I can read all of her books very soon. Next, I read The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther, and I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It had been a while since I read a book that takes place in like a week or less, and it was really fun to revisit that kind of story. The female main character in this book was like severely awkward, and normally I would find that really annoying, but in this book it was actually really endearing. Maybe it's just a part of who I am in that I will like almost always stand behind women and like support them in like a situation, an argument, but I felt like towards the end when the female and male main characters were kind of mad at each other, I feel like they were the same level of angry, but for like very drastically different reasons. And I honestly only felt like the female main character was justified to be that level of angry. And I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but if I remember correctly, the male main character's like anger just felt really displaced. Next up, we have The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. When I was reading about this book, like the back of it, I totally expected the entire book to be from the main character, the woman's perspective. So imagine my shock and honestly low-key horror when the first 2 chapters were from a man's perspective. 2 different men's perspectives, by the way. That was a little unsettling and quite upsetting. I think it was the timing mainly that did it, but I could not stop thinking of the song Man of the Year by Lorde when reading this book. And if you've read this book, you understand. Also, when I said a second ago that the first and second chapters were told from a man's perspective, the last chapter was actually told by the vegetarian's sister's perspective, and just the drastic difference in how these 2 men and a woman look at this woman and like treat her and like how much respect they have for her or how much they actually care for her is so insanely different, like drastically different. And I think that is really reflective of society today and how different people treat women. The next book I read was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I fear that this book has reaffirmed that fae men will always be my biggest weakness. This could maybe be considered a spoiler, but the female main character talks about it within the first couple of chapters, so I wouldn't really count it as one. But I really liked the detail that the female main character, since she has spent her entire life studying the fae, was able to almost immediately realize that the male main character was fae. I also really liked that in this book there were a bunch of references to other books about fae. I thought that was really cool. And honestly, this might be my favorite fantasy book I've ever read. I loved the world building and the way that the fae worked in this book. I just thought it was so interesting and so fun and so cool. Next, I read Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, fun fact, and you would actually know this if you watched my most recent switching my screen time for reading, I accidentally started reading this book first before the other book, Encyclopedia of Fairies, which is actually the first book in the series, and this is the second one. And I didn't realize that until about halfway through this book, unfortunately. So I set this one aside, got the first book, read the entirety of it, and then picked this one up again. And it filled in a lot of blanks. It made everything make a lot more sense, for sure. I honestly think that this is the first fantasy series that I've really enjoyed and found so much fun in. Not that the other fantasy books I've read haven't been fun or interesting, but this is the first one that I've kind of read on my own accord without really being told by other people to read it, and I really liked it. I am so excited to read the last book in this series. The next book I read is Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson, and I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. If I remember correctly, this was actually Holly Jackson's adult novel debut, because all of her other books have been young adult, and it was so good, so good. She somehow managed to put 20 plot twists in this book and have them all be connected and make sense without it being overwhelming and feeling like she's just putting in plot twists to put in plot twists, if you know what I mean. It was so sad and so good and so intense. It is just perfect. Also, I didn't know it was possible for me to like such a dislikable character. And I'm kind of proud of myself for that. I feel like that's growth. Next up, I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. Fun fact, I found this at a thrift store, actually. It's a special edition, independent bookstore, and it had art on the inside, and it's signed. And I don't actually remember if I said it, but I gave this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And yeah, as soon as I started reading this, about 10 chapters in probably, I was like, oh, this is my new favorite Ali Hazelwood book. Got it. Perfect. Amazing. Admittedly, I haven't actually read a book from her in a while, but I'm glad I finally got around to coming back to her stuff, because this was so good. And honestly, from what I remember, better than the other series that I've read from her. Also, new book boyfriend unlocked. Look at him. He's so pretty and perfect and amazing, and he's Irish. Not only is this man Irish, but he's an ex-hockey player and absolutely obsessed with his girl. And Ali Hazelwood expected me to not fall madly in love with him? Right. But of course I did. Also, I related so deeply to the female main character that it's kind of not funny. I mean, it's a little funny, but it's also really not funny. I get her. She gets me. We are the same. I adore her. Next, I read One Last Summer by Kate Spencer, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. This was a very cute, simple summer read. As a girl who constantly feels like she is both doing too much and not doing enough, this female main character really spoke to me. I think I've only read like one other summer camp romance, but this kind of lit a fire in me, and now I need more. The next book I read was Best Summer Ever by Jessica Consolo, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I was a little shocked at first because I thought this book was YA, young adult, but they dropped the F-bomb like 8 times or more within the first like 3 chapters, so I was a little confused on what exactly the genre of this was, but I still really liked it. I don't know if I have actually read a book where the two like perspectives that it switches between aren't love interests. They're just like two friends, or in this case, cousins. I don't know if I've actually read a book like that before, but if I have, it has been a very long time and I really liked it. This was also a really nice reminder that just because a book is labeled YA doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be bad or like poorly written or not as fun as like an adult book. Next up, I read One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. If I could do like half stars on Goodreads, it would have actually been a 3.5. Unfortunately, I don't think that this author, Carly Fortune, is really for me. I've read, I think maybe one other book from her, and I wasn't really into that either, unfortunately, so I don't know if I'll be picking up anything by her again. I did really like the two main characters though, I will admit. Just like the female main character in this book, I also felt super blindsided by the male main character's secret, but I also wasn't really paying much attention to him because we only ever read from her perspective and knew most of what was going on in her life, so I was really focused on that. One thing that I would love to read by Carly Fortune is if we could get a book from the grandmother's perspective, like when she was younger, and even the like situations that they talk about in this book where she's a bit older. Maybe I'm just a slow reader and wasn't really interested in this plot, I guess, but at some point it did just become more of a I want to finish this book more than I want to finish the plot of this book, if that makes sense. The next book I read was Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Now granted, I've only actually ever read one other series by Ali Hazelwood, but I am willing to put money on the fact that this series is like 100 times better and definitely my favorite Ali Hazelwood series. Her storytelling just never ceases to amaze me, and she does plot twists very well, and I just love. And her ability to make you empathize with literally any character, so good. And unfortunately, an age gap romance will always be my guilty pleasure, so I did really enjoy this. Also, this book made me crave wanting to go to a destination wedding so bad. And the last book that I read this summer was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I'll admit, I found it pretty difficult to like actually care about the main character and her life in this story, especially in the beginning of the book. Also, in trying to make the rich kids like sound super spoiled and rich, it just made for like really weird writing because, like, for example, the main female character always referred to her mom as Mummy, like Mummy, and she's American. Just so we're clear on that. Like, not British at all, but called her mom Mummy every single time. Just kind of strange. Before reading this book, it always felt like people that had read this book were kind of in this like secret club of like, oh, this book is so good and no one who hasn't read it knows why. And I wouldn't say that now, having read this book, it's because the book is good, but because the plot twist is so insane. Also, I will say, I I get the plot twist and it makes sense for the story, but it low-key kind of felt like a cop-out. And I don't really know how to talk about it without actually spoiling anything, but the closest thing I can compare it to is like when you're watching a TV show and it's really intense and really cool and there's this like big bad, but in the last episode, the main character like wakes up and it was all a dream. That's kind of what it felt like in a way. And because of that, I can't really decide if I actually want to read the prequel of this book. And that is all the books I read this summer. So now we can move on to all the books that I am hoping to read this fall. It's a long list and I've already been recording for quite a while, so I am going to kind of do a speed run and probably not do too much details about each book. First up, we have The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Lori Gilmore. Next, Falling Like Leaves by Misty Wilson. Then we have Pumpkin Spice and Everything Nice by Katie, and I still don't know how to say her last name, but there it is in case you were wondering. Next is Anatomy by Sana Schwartz. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. The Cinnamon Bun Store by Lori Gilmore. If Not For My Baby by Kate Golden. Fall I Want by Lyra Parrish. How the King of Elfham Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. And then these last couple of books I don't actually have physical copies of yet, but I'm hoping to get them sometime in the season, so I'm going to read them as well. People Watching by Hannah Bonham Young, which I'm actually going to get today at Barnes & Noble after I'm done filming this video. Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, the Barnes & Noble edition of that book, which is the style of books that I have for the other two, comes out on November 11th, I believe. And lastly, The Two of Us by Taylor Torres. I am specifically wanting the special edition because that cover is just so pretty and so cute, but I would have to find someone who's reselling it. So I am like constantly checking eBay and all those other reselling sites. And that is the entirety of my autumn TBR. I am very happy with the amount of books that I read this summer, and I am very excited to start reading some fall-themed books. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!